It's 10:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in 1997. You're sitting in math class, pretending to care about fractions, when you feel it, that tiny vibration in your pocket. Then you hear it, that beep. High-pitched, insistent, impossible to ignore. Your Tamagotchi is hungry, or sad, or dying, and Mrs. Henderson just stopped mid-sentence. You know that look? Every kid in the room knows that look. Within a week, Tamagotchis will be banned, confiscated, added to the contraband list next to pagers and Game Boys. But here's the strange part. That beep didn't just annoy your teachers. It revealed something uncomfortable about childhood that nobody wanted to admit. What you were actually experiencing was a primitive form of what psychologists now call social surveillance through obligation, and understanding why that tiny digital pet felt so urgent might change how you see every notification on your phone today. The Tamagotchi arrived in America in May 1997 like a social contagion. Within 6 months, over 40 million of them were sold worldwide. For $15, you got a keychain with a black and white screen, 3 buttons, and a creature that would die if you ignored it. That was the hook. Not might die. Would die. Guaranteed. Your parents thought it was teaching you responsibility. What it was actually teaching you was anxiety. See, here's what's wild. The Tamagotchi hacked something fundamental about human psychology. We're biologically wired to respond to infant cries. It's a survival mechanism that predates civilization. High-pitched sounds, regular intervals, escalating urgency. That's the sonic signature of something small and helpless that needs you. The Tamagotchi's beep exploited that exact frequency range. Your brain couldn't not respond. It heard baby crying even though your eyes saw plastic toy. Psychologists call this nurturance instinct hijacking. Bandai, the company that made Tamagotchis, called it highly effective product design. And it worked. You checked that thing obsessively. Before school, during lunch, in the bathroom between classes, the second you got home. You weren't playing with it, you were serving it. There's a difference. Play is optional. Obligation is not. Think about the last time your phone buzzed in your pocket. That tiny spike of adrenaline. That compulsion to check immediately. That feeling that something might be wrong if you don't look. You learned that response in 1997. You just didn't know you were learning it. But here's where it gets darker. The Tamagotchi didn't just demand your attention. It demanded it on its schedule, not yours. You couldn't pause it. You couldn't save your progress. You couldn't negotiate. The Tamagotchi operated in real time, which meant your attention had to operate in real time too. Miss a feeding by 2 hours? Did forget to clean up its poop? Did go to a movie with your family? You better hope you can sneak it into the theater. Researchers who studied the Tamagotchi phenomenon found something strange. Kids weren't reporting joy. They were reporting stress. One study from 1998 found that 40% of children who own Tamagotchis described feeling worried or guilty about their device. They described it using the language of obligation, not entertainment. I have to feed it. I have to check on it. I can't let it die. You weren't playing a game. You were performing labor. Emotional labor. For a toy. And here's the uncomfortable part. You couldn't admit that you wanted to stop. Because if you did, what did that say about you? That you couldn't keep a digital blob alive? That you were a bad caretaker? That you failed at responsibility? The Tamagotchi turned care into a performance, and then judged you for your performance. Every death was a report card. And you kept failing. But the really uncomfortable truth? You probably didn't even like it that much. Think back honestly. After the first week, after the novelty wore off, were you delighted every time it beeped? Or were you annoyed? Resentful? Trapped? The toy you begged your parents to buy became a tiny tyrant. And you couldn't throw it away because everyone else had one. Because it was what you did in 1997. Because admitting you were over it meant admitting you were weak. So when your teacher banned Tamagotchis, when she confiscated yours and put it in her desk drawer, do you remember what you felt? You probably said you were angry. But be honest. Underneath the protest, underneath the peer pressure to be outraged, wasn't there a tiny, secret sense of relief? Here's the thing about nostalgia for the Tamagotchi. We remember the ownership, not the experience. We remember having one, being part of the club, comparing ours to other kids on the playground. We remember the social currency. What we conveniently forget is the low-grade anxiety that hummed underneath everything. That nagging awareness that something needed you, always, on a schedule you didn't choose. Sound familiar? Because here's what nobody told you in 1997. You were beta testing the attention economy. The Tamagotchi was a prototype for every app notification, every social media alert, every smartwatch nudge that rules your life now. The mechanics are identical. Create an artificial need. Make it urgent. Make it regular. Make it feel like you're failing if you ignore it. Reward checking. Punish absence. Call it engagement. You learned to be available on demand when you were 9 years old. You learned that being connected meant being obligated. You learned that relationships, even fake ones with digital creatures, required constant maintenance or they died. You learned that your attention wasn't really yours. It belonged to whatever beeped loudest. And when your teacher banned Tamagotchis, she wasn't just stopping a distraction. She was trying to give you back something you didn't know you'd lost. The right to be unavailable. The right to ignore something that demanded you. The right to exist without obligation for 6 hours. She failed, obviously, because the Tamagotchi wasn't the problem. It was the preview. So should you hate the Tamagotchi? Blame it for your phone addiction and your inability to be present? Because here's the thing. You were just a kid. You didn't know what you were signing up for. None of us did. That beep felt urgent because your brain was designed to respond to urgency. The guilt felt real because care is real. The obligation felt mandatory because, in your social world, it was. But now you're an adult. And you get to choose. You get to ask, what actually deserves my immediate attention? What's a real emergency and what's manufactured urgency? What happens if I let something wait? What happens if something dies because I didn't respond in time? The answer might surprise you. Usually, nothing happens. The world keeps turning. The relationship survives. The obligation was artificial. The emergency was theater. Your Tamagotchi taught you that you were responsible for keeping things alive that were never really alive to begin with. That lesson followed you. Into every group chat, every notification badge, every unread email counter. That tiny beep in 1997 became a symphony of beeps in 2025. And you still feel that same obligation. That same low-grade guilt when you don't check. But here's what you didn't know back then. You were allowed to let it die. You were allowed to fail at taking care of something that existed only to consume your attention. You were allowed to walk away. You still are. So the next time your phone buzzes in your pocket and you feel that Pavlovian urge to check immediately, remember, that's not your instinct. That's not your biology. That's 1997, still running its code. That's a tiny plastic egg in Mrs. Henderson's desk drawer, still beeping, still demanding, still trying to convince you that something will die if you're not constantly available. But you're not in math class anymore. And you get to decide what deserves that beep. That kid who felt guilty about a dying Tamagotchi? They grew up. They learned that care doesn't mean constant surveillance. That responsibility doesn't mean 24/7 availability. That sometimes the kindest thing you can do, for yourself, for others, for the digital ghosts that haunt your pocket, is to not respond immediately. The beep isn't gone. It never will be. But at least now you know what it's really asking for. And you get to decide if it's worth answering.